seen it before. So in preparation for that, what would I be doing first? First of all, do I need anything in state? What would I put in state? Yeah, I'll make an empty array. It's going to get filled up eventually, but I know that this is something that my whole app will probably need. So that is why I'm putting it in the app component. Everything will branch off from here, so regardless of how large my app gets, there's this top of the tree here that has the information that my whole app might need. It wouldn't make as much sense to save this further down, as it's kind of like my global data. All right, which lifecycle method do we use for the page load to go grab our data? Component did mount. It is ready. It's all ready. It did the did word. Okay. Ryan, help me compose an Axios.get request that to this URL and console log the response when it comes back. I have imported Axios and I have my URL. Okay. Cool. Whoops, wrong one. All right. So that when I send out a request, two possible things are going to come back. Cool. And I'll just set this up because we're not worrying about handling errors just yet. We're just going to console log if it happens. But a dot then, what comes back in the dot then? What's like the conventional word we call this? Response, yeah. So I'll just say res, and we'll console log that to make sure it's working. Open up the console and see. All right, object, line 20. So that's our access request here. We open it up and response. So it's going to be res.what to get my array. Res.data. Pretty straightforward with this API. So we know that res.data is the array. And Ryan, what did you say I need to do with that array? Yeah. Set state because our array is ready. So we'll say, hey, to-dos should now be the response data. And save it as the array. Why is it not res.data.results? I thought other APIs did that. What would happen if I said res.data.results here? No. So that's why it's res.data. Just trying to make a point, like always console log res, like this is a pattern that maybe you should stick to for the first little bit. Before you set anything, do this. See what this looks like, see if it's just res.data. There might be res.data.results.array bracket 1.objects, you know, it could be way down there. The problem is if we said res.data.results right here, we've introduced something very interesting. Because now I'm going to try to map over my data. I'm going to say mapped to-dos is this dot state dot to-dos dot map. And for each to-do, I'm just going to console log right now. But with that, I get this. And this says it cannot read property map of undefined. What is it telling me is undefined right now? To-dos. But I thought I defined to-dos. It's an empty array. This shouldn't break the map. Map can work with empty arrays. So when did this turn into this? yeah, this doesn't exist. So even though I started it off as an array, as soon as the page loads, it turns it into an undefined because results doesn't exist. So as long as I'm accessing the right key, my map now knows what I'm talking about. It doesn't break. And if I look at my console, I'll see that all 4 of my to-dos have been console logged. Wait, that's not it. There we are. All 3 of my to-dos. Okay. Well, I don't want to just console log. We're going to longhand this and then break it apart. So I'm going to turn this into a function. And I'm going to return a div. Now, what properties does each to-do have or possibly have? Underscore ID, title, description, price, completed, and image URL. So there's a lot of data we can use. Let's start off with maybe just the title, to-do.title. We'll give it a key. And since this is coming from a database, what should the key be? Yeah, the one unique thing, because we may have 2 to-dos with the same title, but not the same ID. And then just to see these showing up, we'll display it down below as mapped to-dos. Hey, I must have been angry or something. All right, so technically this fulfills the first requirement, get the GET request. But at this point, I could go out and start building out this div so more things show up, right? I could, you know, start throwing in price maybe. But I'm going to end up having to refactor this anyway. So about at this point where I know things are working, I want to start modularizing it so I can build out each to-do. I don't have to build the list along with the to-do, along with all the functionality in the same file. So to make this effect as modular as we can within React, how many components am I going to create for this mapping effect? Give you a clue, it's between 1 and 3. Why 2? 2 is right. You had a 1 in 3 chance of guessing, so. Yeah, we want a list component that holds all the to-dos, so it's like a container. We'll call it the to-do list. And then it's going to map out a bunch of to-do components. So a list that contains them all, and an individual one that represents each div that we're mapping out. And that's a good way to approach this. So first, we'll start with the to-do list.js. And I'm going to introduce something to folder structure today, because going forward, your components will start getting more and more. You'll have, we've made maybe 4 or 5 max per app right now. Later, you may have 15, 20. This starts getting really hard to organize. So we have to start thinking about our source folder. How do we split this up into good parts? So something that we would suggest is make a lowercase components folder where everything other than the app.js and the index.js go. So to-do list will go inside of components. And I'm starting to just try to organize a bit more. So I'll quickly get the to-do list out. Is it going to be a functional component or a class component? Functional, doesn't need any thoughts of its own. It just does what it's told. Oh yeah, yeah, and if we get to the put request, we'll end up doing it in this app. Because sometimes what if, you know, all of your to-dos need the ability to toggle themselves, like you click the edit button and only one to-do toggles and shows a form. That to-do needs to be able to do that independently of all the others. So we'd map out a bunch of class components rather than functional components so they can all think for themselves. But we'll get to that. For now, I'm just going to put some empty tags in here. We'll talk about that too. But question, how do I import to-do list to my app component? Import to-do list from Slash, no, kidding, dot slash components slash to-do list. Yeah, it's now in a folder. So we need to give the import the relative path to where it's at. We're saying, hey, you're not side by side. App, you're sitting next to components, but inside of there is your to-do list component. So look in that folder for this file. So your imports will begin to grow as your folder structure grows as well. Now we have our to-do list. So I'll put that, instead of showing my map to-dos here, I'm going to show a to-do list component here. And what does it need as a prop? The to-dos from our state. That's pretty much all it needs, at least at this time. So we'll say you're going to receive some to-dos from this .state.todos, and then I'm going to cut this out and put it in the to-do list. Oh, wrong place. Right place. So div and mapped to-dos, but it's broken. What is broken and how do I fix it? Yeah, to props. And we're back. Okay, so we've thrown it down one level, but how many components are we making? Do, if you're French. So let's make a to-do. I'm going to put that in the components folder. And this is the one that might eventually be a class component, but for now we're going to start it off as a functional, because by default everything should be a functional component until you find the reason for it to be a class. Because it's not hard to change a functional component to a class, but if you start off with a class and don't end up needing it, this is a bunch of extra code. Let's start off dry and add as needed. All right, so what is the, where are we going to use this to-do component? Which file am I going to import it on? To-do list. Without a second thought. How come I didn't have to say /components/todo.js? They are in the same folder, so I don't need to tell it to look in components. We're already in components. All right, so instead of returning this div, we're going to return a to-do, which makes the statement much simpler. We can just get rid of the return in the brackets and tell it to list out our to-do components. What props does to-do need? Yeah, pretty much everything from this object, right? Title, description, price, completed. Do we want to name all 5 props individually, or do we just want to spread it in? Yeah. So we could say title equals to-do.title and description equals to-do.description. Or we could just say, you need everything, so here's everything. So now it's getting all those props without us having to type them all manually. But we also need to give it the key as we are mapping it out. Isn't that so elegant? Yay. So yeah, the to-do doesn't have the key. The to-do has ID, description, price, completed, title. Key is something we're just giving React, and it won't actually show up in props down here. React takes it out and uses it for its own selfish needs. But let's get the title to show up. So I'm in to-do. How do I get the title to show up again? Props.title. All right, because we're passing all of every property of each to-do is being passed as a prop. So we already have them all, and I don't want to say props a whole lot. So just to kind of keep in mind, what do I have access to? I'm going to destructure my props. I know I'm receiving a title, a description, image URL, completed, price, and an ID, all from props. Spread props into what? No, unfortunately, I see what you're saying, but what that would do is it would declare a new object with all the contents of props and then reassign it to props, which would break because it's a constant. And it would just be like, your variable doesn't have a name. Yeah. Yeah, the to-do is the only thing this is the only data we're actually seeing, which is crazy. We've written 4 components and this is all we're seeing. Is this one H1? Yeah, the list job is, in a lot of this, the reason this is called a container component, it's a container for a list of other subcomponents. The reason you do this is for styling. Because if I put a style on this div, this is my container of my entire list. So I can say border 1 pixel solid black, and I get the square around my entire list, right? It's containing all 3. But then if I go to my to-do and I give it a border, maybe 1 pixel solid red, we can see each subcomponent inside of it. For styling purposes, this is great. If we wanted the to-dos to be children of a flex box, which div would be the flex, the display flex? Yeah, I can make this a flex box, and all of these would be flex children. Or I can make this a grid, and these would all be the direct grid elements. Yeah, container, it's the parent-child relationship, just as if we were to hard code it in an HTML file, like we have our container, and then we just start putting divs in it. This is what we're trying to replicate, but just across multiple files. So we can style container and children separate. And it's just easier to work with. As we'll see, as to-do gets larger, because each to-do, right now we're just displaying the title, but when this app is completed, what will we be displaying? Title, well, first of all of these will be displayed. So that right there will fill this up a little bit more. But what else will each to-do need? Each one will need a form for the put request. That's crazy. So that is a bit of code right there, making this having to be a class so we can build in the form stuff. What else will it need? Delete button, edit button with their own functionality. So this component is going to get huge. And rather than trying to map out and then creating the whole component right here, let's split it up. So we're like, hey, whatever the to-do needs is just this file. And I can focus on it for all this complexity. Modularization, making it modular, making it awesome. Okay, so that is step 1 and 2. We were able to get the data when the page loads and modularize the to-do list and to-do. So check and check, wrong button. I swear there's a check mark symbol. There it is. Check. No. Check. And check. All right. We could. You hold in the option key and then press an alpha character, any letter, and it will have special symbols. This was option V. Makes check marks. Checks. Yeah. But there's all sorts of symbols you can play with. Yeah, for ASCII. So here is where I'd maybe work for just a moment and get everything displaying on the to-do, just to start off. So we can put in the title. If it has a description, we'll show that. If it has a price, we'll show that. But what did I just do there with price? Yeah, so what am I actually telling my JavaScript to do right here? Yeah, this is an if-then statement, but I thought it's an or. Yeah, ors work that way, because how do ors work? As long as one condition is true, it returns that condition. So if this is true, it will never check this side of the or statement. It will just make the price that we entered when we made the to-do. But if there is not a price, then it'll look for this value, and this is truthy. It's not an empty string, so it's going to register as true. And if there isn't a price, then by default, we're just showing 0. We don't want empty blocks. If we're going to show the price on every to-do, we should give it some placeholder text to show.
So question, so back when you did the, well, binary statements?
Yeah.
So that's just a regular act?
So this is an or, and has to check both conditions.
Right, but I know that the question like this and this. So
Yeah, so this is this or this instead of this and this. So and is like if there's a price, then do this, where or is like if this is not true, then do this. But and this would have to be true to get to this, where this is more of like one or the other. Or you could also make this statement, maybe you don't want to show the price at all if there isn't a price. So how would we word that instead? We only want to show a price if there is a price. How can I make that dynamic render? Well, I'll ask, is there a price? If there is, then give me a p tag with the price in it. And now only the ones that have a price will show up, the other ones won't. So you can choose to not show it at all if it doesn't exist, or you can choose to give it a placeholder value if it doesn't exist. Styling wise, which one's going to be easier to deal with? Yeah, the placeholder, because that way there's consistency in every to-do. There's not this empty space when there isn't a price. You know, with this example, this one's going to be taller. These are naturally going to be shorter. So same with description. We might say description or no description. Just to, I mean, this may not be the best way, but at least we're getting some placeholder for consistency. But it's up to you. You know, you can play with all these statements depending on what you want to display to the user. Dynamic rendering in React is awesome because it's so simple to set up. With vanilla JavaScript, you would be asking a good if-else statement. Where here we don't have to. Yeah.
There's no description listed.
If this is false, then check the truthiness of this value. If it's truthy, then use it. Since it's not an empty string, it's using it when this is falsy. But if this has data, it's truthy, and it uses this and never checks the additional value because the OR statement doesn't need to.
So is that just built-in functionality so you don't have to use additional?
It's technically still a conditional. It's a conditional operator, much like a greater than or less than. But it's just its own functionality. It will check the first condition. If it's not true, it will check the second condition. We can use that for rendering in React in interesting ways, but yeah, it will work in vanilla. It's all same logic applies.
Are there any other operators that work with that?
Or the and and the or are the main ones. Yeah. Or the ternary. So and, or, and ternaries are great conditional operators for this. We also have the completed, which I don't want to do an input just yet. We'll just display p tag this to do, and then I'd like to say is or is not done using the to-do's completed status. So what could I write inside of the brackets here for this to dynamically say this to-do is done or this to-do is not done? What operator are we thinking I'm going to have to use? So I could ask, is it, you know, not completed? But then how do I say, then show this? Otherwise, show this. Yeah, we got to use a ternary. So if it's not completed, then say is not done. But if it is completed, it is done. And now this to do is not done, this to do is done, this to do is not done. So Booleans are awesome. You can, all sorts of dynamicism, that's a word, right in line like this. So straightforward. It's almost easy.
If you want to put a $sign in the price line, would you put just in quotations the $sign?
You could do that or template literal it. $sign.
Yeah, that's the syntax.
But now it says price undefined. Price undefined. Why is it now not loading my $0 amount? This string is truthy now. The string isn't empty. We've added a $sign. So even if this is undefined, this is still registering as truthy and it's never hitting our condition. Dang it. So we could turn this into a ternary if we want this. Let's get rid of the $ here and just put it right before it. Now it's either going to say what it is or the default. There's always a way. After much trial and tribulation, you will find it. Lastly, the image, if we have one. I'm always a fan of, I'm not a fan, I'm a human. I'm going to put it as a background image. I just like that effect. I think it's very pretty. Background image. And what's the syntax to get image URL as the background image of this div? URL. Okay, it's not liking it, but this is the right syntax. Why doesn't it like it? We're in JavaScript land, yeah. We got to tell it to read this as JavaScript. What didn't I do? 10 points to the house that can find my error. Can't resolve inspector. Okay, that is really ambiguous. I've never seen this error before. Let's see. Well, we know something in here broke it. So if I comment this line out, well, React's having a moment. Let's try this. React's really having a moment. So to do JS, it's not giving us a line number. Oh goodness. What's that? Yours not broke? Okay, let's see if it was just a React app issue. NPM's, yeah. Sometimes, if this works, I'll be glad that it did. Dang it. Sometimes that is the case. But I now see what the issue is. React tried to help me, and it broke the whole operation. No, Node tried to help me. Where did Node put in a line of code that I did not write? Line 2. When did I say import URL from inspector? It just threw it in for me when I used the word URL down here. So no, and yes. Yeah, it's like, oh, you said the word URL. I'll do it again, URL, and immediately it imported it for me. But no, if we just be aware of that, Node tries to help sometimes. And, we treat it nicely because usually it does the right thing, but sometimes it makes mistakes. And URL is not defined. I know. Wait. npm str. Let's get it. Let's get it. Yes. And then we'll give it some background size as cover. Now I'm fearing at the moment. How many of you are doing all your styling inline like this? Well, stop. I'm being a bad example. I'm being a bad. What would in here? What would be appropriate to have as inline styling? Just the image because it has to be tied to data. This and this should be done in CSS. Yeah. You know what? I should practice what I preach. So source, new file, style.css. We'll get some defaults in here. I have a look that I like. That's the look I like. Let's import it. We'll just do it on the index.js. Cool. And then I'll give this div a class name as well. Oh, what would be a good class name for this div? Is it the list? Yeah, to do or to do div. You know, it's the div that is each to do, something nice and descriptive like that. So I can go into here and make my to do div. And the two pieces I wanted was background size cover and the border. So I'll take all that out. That's a little easier to look at now. And background size cover, green, padding 5 pixels maybe, and a border radius. Just go crazy with it. Margin maybe 5 pixels all around. Hey, ooh, satisfying. Well, I'd probably make, that's my individual to do. Probably also make a to do list class, which would be this div, the one above it all. And maybe we'll give some padding to this so the to-dos are squished in a little bit. Yeah. Nice. It almost looks like we're using Flexbox, but it's just just the use of padding with divs that naturally grow. Okay. At this point, I think we have a nice display set up. We can see our to-dos. We're going to make the default color white. Oh, that doesn't help. Let's make it. White with the text shadow. We're getting some ideas here. So text shadow. I believe it needs 4 things. I hate programming these myself, so I give it 4 blank values. Then I jump into DevTools, and I find that CSS styling, wherever I can find it, text shadow. It looks like it doesn't have everything it needs. Does it need 5? No. How many zeros does it need to start off with? 3. Okay. And when I give it the right amount, I can click this, and it will give me the ability to program my text shadow in DevTools. So, woohoo! This is fun. Let's add the. We need to add the. There we go. Now we can choose color as well. Let's just do hundos all along, and with 1 opacity so we can see it. And now we can change the box shadow to maybe less blur. Ooh. You can really drop it. Pretty sure there's a Nelly song about this. Cool. Well, what happens when I refresh my page? What happens to this CSS? Don't let it go. Copy it. You found out what you wanted. Control C, Control V. And now we have our text shadow without having to fidget with it and go back and forth. So box shadow, text shadow, all those kind of design tools, they're all pre-built into DevTools. So you can come in here and just, sweet. Mozilla has it too. It may look a little different, but most DevTools will allow you to do this styling in the browser because it's much easier. You get this instant feedback of what everything looks like. I'm going to make these darker. Or is that lighter? Dang it. All right, spend enough time on that. Sweet. Sweet to-dos, bro. All right, at this point, you're like, cool, I got my get request stuff done. I can see my to-dos. I'm ready for the ability to add more. And so that's going to take us to the post request and then delete request. But I'm going to stop the recording here now as part 1. You know, getting everything to show up, modularizing it, styling it a little bit. This series will probably end up being about 4 videos long, I'm assuming. Take you through every operation in detail.